Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into a habit that is just absolutely exhausting. Over-explaining. You know the exact feeling, right? Sitting there, drafting a massive 5-paragraph text message just to back out of a casual dinner. Or maybe you find yourself frantically justifying a completely normal, everyday choice to a total stranger. It is incredibly draining to constantly apologize for simply existing. Well, today, we're going to explore how the legendary psychoanalyst Carl Jung traced this exact behavior back to a profound and often totally overlooked childhood wound. Let's start by taking a quick look inside the anxious mind. If you struggle with this compulsion, you probably catch yourself constantly asking why you feel certain emotions, and more importantly, if those emotions are even valid. It's kind of like you're putting your own mind on trial every single day. And the prosecution? Yeah, it literally never rests.
Then, right on cue, comes the crushing fear of how other people perceive you. You desperately hope your justifications will make sense to them. So what do? You meticulously, and I mean meticulously, craft your words. You analyze every single syllable just to make sure nobody around you misunderstands or judges your actions.
This whole thing eventually culminates in a relentless cycle of self-doubt. You start second-guessing your own internal reality, constantly wondering, am I just being too sensitive, too dramatic? Am I just plain wrong? Your mind starts spiraling faster and faster, desperately trying to find some objective anchor for what is a purely subjective feeling.
Now, we often disguise this over-explaining. We tell ourselves it's empathy, harmless politeness, or just being a considerate person. But Jung believed something completely different. He saw this behavior as a mask for a deep disconnection from the self. So rather than being polite, it actually reveals a state of profound self-neglect. It's a poorly healed psychological wound that we are frantically trying to patch up with words.
Section 1. The loss of permission. Childhood invalidation.
You see, this compulsion to explain doesn't just pop out of nowhere when you're an adult. It's actually a psychological descent that starts really early in childhood. Picture a child expressing genuine sadness or anger. But instead of being comforted, they're met with disdain, maybe irony, or they're just told they're exaggerating. This systematic invalidation from adults forces that child to skip normal emotional processing and internalize a highly dangerous message about their own fundamental self-worth.
And wow, does that brutal internalized message take root quickly. You learn to shape your words strictly to avoid upsetting the authority figures in your life. You basically adopt this belief just to feel safe from abandonment or rejection. You learn that a solid, convincing, well-structured argument is required just to have the right to feel. And honestly, it's a habit you probably carry right into your office or your romantic relationships today.
So, this brings us to a foundational psychological concept. By constantly trying to convince other people that your emotions are reasonable, what you're really doing is seeking a lost permission to exist. A person who constantly explains themselves is desperately searching for that fundamental internal authority they were denied as a kid. They're looking outward for a stamp of approval that realistically should only ever come from within.
Over time, relying entirely on that external gaze to confirm if your experience is legitimate, well, it locks you inside an invisible prison. You become completely dependent on others' understanding just to affirm your own reality. It's a tragic trade-off, really. You are trading away your true psychological autonomy for a false, fleeting sense of emotional security.
Section 2. A silent self-betrayal. The cost of adaptation.
In this state, you slowly stop living for yourself and you start acting for everyone else. You laugh when things aren't actually funny, you say yes when your entire body is screaming no, and you over-explain every single move, all just to avoid being seen in a negative light. You end up building this eternal theater, where your audience, which is literally everyone else, holds way more power than you do. And you're supposed to be the protagonist of your own life. Carl Jung actually warns that compulsive explanation is a highly sophisticated form of submission. Think about it. With each and every justification you offer up to the world, you are unconsciously begging for this allowance. You're essentially telling the listener, hey, I can only exist if you allow it. Now, when your ego becomes nothing more than a servant to external acceptance, it totally fractures from your true self. This fragmentation is a massive driver of neurosis. It leads to incredibly painful symptoms like chronic anxiety, intense existential crises, an inability to make even the most basic decisions, low self-esteem, and just this profound feeling of emptiness. Your soul is essentially screaming to be heard, but it's been systematically silenced in the name of fitting in.
So if your existence is merely an edited performance designed to get approval, you really have to stop and ask yourself the ultimate question. Who is actually authoring your story? If you're constantly, endlessly adjusting yourself for other people, you remain nothing more than a supporting character in someone else's narrative.
Section 3. Building internal authority, reclaiming the self.
Okay, so how do we cure this self-abandonment and finally step off that stage? We have to look at Jung's ultimate remedy, internal authority. This is the ability to deeply, fundamentally validate your own subjective experience. You stop asking the world, will they understand, and you start quietly, confidently asserting to yourself, it doesn't actually matter if they understand. This is true for me.
It's a massive, profound shift between two entirely different psychological stances. On one side, you have the ego, right? Begging for understanding, constantly explaining itself out of a deep-seated insecurity. But on the other side, you have the true self, emanating real authority and firmly asserting that its truth is simply not up for debate. It's a total existential shift in your psyche's center of gravity.
But, I'll be honest, building this authority, not easy at all. It requires true individuation. You need the courage to endure what Jung called the desert of inner solitude. It is a profoundly uncomfortable, yet totally liberating experience to hold a no without any guilt whatsoever. It's the act of simply saying, I can't make it to the meeting, and then actively resisting that burning urge to add 3 paragraphs of fabricated excuses.
Section 4. The power of silence, a psychological revolution.
The difference in outcomes when you actually apply this is night and day. Over-explaining leaves you in a state of lack. It makes you entirely vulnerable to manipulation by people who demand reasons for your boundaries. But silence? Wow, silence is incredibly unsettling to manipulators. It completely deactivates their psychological control and acts as an unmovable stone wall against toxic power dynamics. It completely stops the music they desperately want you to dance to.
Jungian thought emphasizes that integrated people do not convince, they communicate. Once you stop justifying yourself, you start offering your truth as a gift, rather than a frantic plea for acceptance. Communication totally ceases to be this desperate performance. You just don't need to present hard evidence for your feelings anymore, because your own internal coherence communicates everything that needs to be said.
The silence that comes from this newly found internal authority acts as a powerful filter, and it triggers profound shifts in your external life. People who used to benefit from your insecurity, yeah, they'll likely distance themselves. And honestly, that is not a punishment, it's liberation. You'll start attracting connections based on genuine, mutual respect rather than control. Your perception of yourself clears up, and that chronic, heavy anxiety finally begins to fade away.
Because ultimately, you stop emitting this constant vibration of doubt and submission. Instead, you start emitting a magnetic frequency of unshakable psychological integrity. The world tends to treat with far more respect those who treat themselves with respect. You finally learn how to occupy your own space without begging anyone for it.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to leave with this final provocative thought. Think about the boundaries you are finally ready to defend with silence. What is that one explanation you keep repeating to someone in your life that you are, as of today, finally ready to just let go of? Take a moment, recognize it, and reclaim your... Welcome to this